and talking to her neurosurgeon and her trauma surgeon about her prognosis. And at that time, my thought was that I'd very likely be sitting in that same seat maybe 2, 4, 6 months later in that ICU by her bedside. The doctors thought that that was certainly a possibility, probably likely. As she progressed day to day, it started to become evident that she was not going to be in ICU in, maybe not even 2 weeks. I was told by all of her physicians that she was going to have a setback, that at one point in the first 72 hours, she was going to get worse. And then again, in the first week, she was going to get worse. And she would continue to have days where she just had setbacks, and this was going to be a process much longer than I expected. Since then, 4 weeks ago, nearly 4 weeks ago, she's never gotten worse. As we got to about the 1 week stay in the ICU, we started to evaluate where are we going to move her to for a rehab facility. We received a lot of inputs from a lot of great places in the country. It became quickly evident that one of the best places in the country for this type of injury was here in Houston at Tier Memorial Hermann. So about 2 weeks ago, I started going through the process myself of what would I need in order to get back with my crew to continue training for STS 134. And this has been a learning process in brain injury for me and what rehab is like. And after speaking to her rehab doctors and the neurosurgeons here, it also became evident that she was going to be very busy. Her days are filled from the time she gets up at 8 o'clock until after 6 p.m. with 6 hours of speech, occupational, and physical therapy. So she's got very busy days and meals in between. And I started to think about STS 134, about the mission, my crew, the fact that I've been training for it for nearly a year and a half, and considering a bunch of other factors, including what Gabrielle would want me to do and what her parents and her family and my family would like. I ultimately made the decision that I would like to return and command STS 134. So at that point, I went to my boss, Peggy Whitson, the chief of the astronaut office.
Well, Mark obviously had to make the first part of this decision because we weren't going to ask him to command 134 unless he felt comfortable and ready to do that. And in addition to feeling comfortable, he has an incredible support group, which made us more comfortable with the fact that he had folks to help him through this process, and that it would make it a doable thing for him to perform the mission. From my perspective, obviously, I have to choose a crew that will be able to support the mission, and I want to be able to do that with the least amount of risk overall for the mission and to optimize for success. And obviously, although CJ has been training as a backup the last few weeks, it's still better to choose the fellow that's been training for a year and a half in order to reduce the overall mission risk. So we went forward with the plan back to my boss, Brent.
Both Peggy and Mark sat down with myself, my deputy, Janet Cavandi, and my assistant, Brian Kelly. And we wanted to talk about the situation and make sure we had thought about all the potential risks to the mission and address those appropriately before we made a final decision. So they came to me. Mark had a very good plan. He had a routine that he explained to me how his days would proceed and how he would be able to commit the time necessary to train for the mission. That made me feel comfortable. We also discussed with our doctors and who were in communication with Gabrielle's doctors about the potential risk of her condition changing over the next 8 weeks or so, and that potentially resulting in a change in Mark's ability to commit his time to the mission. And we had very good answers from the doctors. Mark had a very good plan, but there was a piece that I felt that was missing. And so we looked at this. We said, well, we don't have to make the decision. This was a week ago. We don't have to make the decision today. We need to make it in about a week. So we wanted to put Mark's plan into effect. So we asked him to train this week with a schedule that would approximate a schedule he would have while he was training for the mission, and put his plan into effect and see how it worked out. It also gave us an opportunity to observe Mark. Obviously, as his management, it was important for us to know that he would be able to focus while he was in training and not be distracted by Gabrielle's situation up at the hospital during her rehab. So during the week, Mark flew a couple times in the T-38 with instructors. We asked him to do essentially a complete checkout back into the airplane he hadn't flown since December. So he did that. He was in a shuttle ascent and entry simulation for 4 hours. That gave us an opportunity to observe him, as well as a couple other training events during the week. He was also away for an evening, which he will have to do during training. There will be times when he'll be away from Houston for a night or more. And so he was up in DC for a prayer breakfast, and we felt that was a good chance for him to see what it was going to be like to be away from Gabrielle. And I think that was the first time he had probably been away from her, right, yeah, since the shooting. So we thought we had a good process for bringing back Mark into training before we made the decision, getting the chance to observe him, and then we met again yesterday. We talked to all the individuals, or as many as we could, that had a chance to observe Mark during the week, and then we were able to unanimously decide that Mark was indeed ready to resume training on Monday and fly as the commander. Of course, I don't make that final decision, and Peggy, myself, and Janet and Brian, we made that recommendation to my boss, Mike Coates. It then went through, obviously, the program, the AA at headquarters, Bill Gerstenmaier, and all the way to Charlie Bolden. So that's how we got from a week ago when Mark felt he was ready to today when but I think personally, I'm very glad to be able to have Mark back as the commander of 134.
So coincidentally, we had a little bit of a launch slip about the same time that this happened. So our launch date moved from earlier in April to April 19th. And before that, we had another slip that moved us from February to April. And when that happens, it frees up a lot of time in your launch schedule. So we didn't have a busy training flow even before January 8th. Actually, which is what we like, something pretty reasonable, rather than a training flow that is jam-packed. And that's because of our launch date moving. So those extra days we got turned out that it helped. So actually, I didn't really miss anything. Maybe one orbit sim for what's called dock late inspection, but my crew did a great job at it, and so they don't actually need me. I'm sitting here today. So just that one event, and I'll start up again here on Monday. I have not had that discussion. We do have email on orbit, so I can stay up to date with email. We do have what's called an IP phone on board. My experience as a space shuttle crew member is I don't use it all that often. It will probably be similar to that, so my plan is really not to ask for anything extra, and any updates I need I can get via email. Well, Bob, I don't want to get into details on her condition or her prognosis, but let me say that she improves every day. The neurosurgeon and the trauma doc's certainly out of the picture now, the ICU doctor. but her rehab doctors are just incredibly impressed with her progress and the fact that the slope of that curve is very steep. They think she's going to make a really good recovery.
You think you got the okay from her too?
Did I personally get the okay?
Did you get the impression with her that she's comfortable with you then?
Well, I know her very well, and she would be very comfortable with the decision that I made. Well, when I told her mom in the ICU in Tucson that I most likely would not be flying STS 134, she said something like, "What, are you kidding me? You know, you have to go do that." And I explained to her, well, I'm not going to leave an ICU, you know, the ICU when Gabrielle's in the ICU. That's just not going to happen. You know, and it's in another state. So, you know, I thought that was, you know, that was it. And then I had a similar conversation with her father. So they've been very supportive right from the beginning. So my flight surgeon, Joe Dervay, told me when we were even back in Tucson, he says, when you get to the point of making a decision, make the decision, live with it for a couple days, and then make the other decision and live with that one for a couple days. So I actually went through that process over a week ago. And so I got a sense of what it would be like. And as expected, today, a week after I think I first spoke to Peggy about this, you know, I feel very confident that I made the right decision, not only for me, but for my crew members, for my family, and for my wife.
Mark, given the positive nature of how things have been going with rehabilitation, do you have any hopes that she can come here for the launch? Is that something that you think might be a possibility?
Absolutely. I mean, I have every intention that she'll be there for the launch. I've already talked to her doctors about it. So there really shouldn't be any reason why she can't go to the launch. So that's I haven't spoken to Peggy and Brent about that yet, but that's in my plan.
We really did some soul searching. You know, we researched Gabby's condition and you know, Mark's support system, and really looked into this. We think this is a very doable thing, and it is the best thing for our mission to have Mark be the commander.